Growing up, my dad was a biker and my mom is a nurse. They divorced when I was very young. I have no recollection of them being together, but I lived in two different worlds. So one of my first memories is being pushed on a swing by a big guy in a motorcycle gang. And that was the world that my dad lived in. And my mom was very proper. She drinks a pina colada once a year and feels funny. And, we don't say that other people are alcoholics or addicts, but my father really enjoyed drinking and a slew of other things. I don't think that my childhood made me an alcoholic. I think that that's, I use some of my circumstances as an excuse. When I was drinking in college, I had something called Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde syndrome. I would turn into this angry person, and all of the daddy issues that I had came pouring out, and I wasn't a nice person, and I really don't know how I had friends. I just had this feeling that the world would be a better place without me, that I was not beneficial to anyone in any way, and that my family and that everybody that I knew would be better off without me. And so I decided, to end my life. Obviously it didn't work, because here I am. And it wasn't one of those cries for help where I wanted someone to come rescue me. Like, I really was just done. I felt like the way that I felt that night, that I was gonna feel that way forever. And so I tried to kill myself, and in a horrible way. And I happened to make a phone call to my best friend, and she told me that I said I can't do this anymore. And she made a series of phone calls. My stepmom came and rescued me, and my feet were purple and I was dying. If she hadn't been there 5 minutes sooner, I would have been gone. And I went to the hospital, and I remember the ER doctor said, "How did you do this to yourself?" And I just said, I'm so numb, And then I had to go to a mental hospital, you know what I mean? That was pretty much my only option, and it was so scary. And I remember I didn't understand that I was detoxing. I didn't understand any of that. They were taking my blood pressure like every 5 minutes, and I was screaming at them, "Why aren't you taking everyone else's blood pressure?" I learned about my powers of manipulation that day, because I convinced a psychiatrist that I was fine, and that I wanted to go home, and she let me leave. And you would think that that experience would have been eye-opening for me, and that I would have stopped doing drugs and drinking, but I didn't. I kept going for like a decade more, and I was still super in love with my darkness, and I just wasn't okay for a really long time. In the midst of this, I met a guy, and I don't even know. We had been friends for a couple years. I don't know what he saw in me, and because I didn't like me, I didn't understand why anybody else would. That guy ended up being my husband, and I was so crazy. I was so crazy. What ended up happening eventually is I got pregnant, and I, thank goodness, figured out that I was pregnant when I was about like a week and a half and pregnant. And I remember I was standing outside of this bar with my best friend at the time, and I had a drink in my hand and a cigarette in the other, and I took a puff off my cigarette, and I said to her, "I think I'm pregnant. This is the last drink and the last cigarette I think I can have for a while." And and it turns out that I was pregnant, and luckily I was able to stop drinking and smoking. I didn't even eat processed cheese my entire pregnancy. And the thing is that I wasn't sober. I was dry. I really wanted to drink, but I didn't. And then my son came, and I had these plans to be this amazing parent. I was going to be a soccer mom. I was going to wear khakis and polos, and I was going to become this person. And I didn't understand what addiction and alcoholism was. And so when my son was about a month old, he was born in November, and so it was December. I went to a Christmas party, and I thought that I could just have one drink. And my friend and I finished a gallon of vodka. We tried to go into a bar. They said, "No, thank you, please don't come in here." And I stumbled into my house, and my husband was sitting on the couch, and he looked at me and he said, "Amber, I want a divorce." I was in what's called a gray out. So I sort of remember it and I sort of don't. And I smashed everything in our entryway, and I said, "Pick it up." And he said, "No." And I went to bed, and then I woke up in the morning and I saw our entryway. And I sent my husband a message, and I said, "I don't remember a lot about last night, but I remember that you want a divorce." And he said, "I said that, but what I mean is, if you knew the person you were when you drank, I don't think you'd want that person to raise our child." Yeah, it was like being stabbed in the heart, but I still drank for 2 more days while I thought about it because, that's how I roll. And eventually I did make it back into the rooms, and the truth is that I got back into recovery because I didn't want my husband to leave. My son sleeps like a rock, so he would be in bed, I'd be downstairs drinking alone, watching Netflix, nothing exciting, and I would go into his room while he was sleeping, and I would lay next to his bed, and I would cry, and I would say, I'm so sorry that I'm your mother. I'm so sorry that this is the person that's gonna raise you, and I wish that I could stop for you, but I can't. And he never heard that because he was sleeping, but that's how I felt every day. And I woke up in the morning feeling awful, and he would say to me, he was 3 or 4, and he would say, why are you so angry in the morning? And I realized that he was catching on. I remember I had about 6 days sober, and I ran into this gentleman that was the head chef at this restaurant slash bar that I would drink at after work, and he recognized me, and he's like, how do I know you? And I was like, no, you don't know me. You don't know me. He figured it out, and he asked me, if I had a sponsor, and I said that I was going to do interviews and that I was going to have this magical, perfect sponsor this time. It was going to be different, and he laughed at me, and he said, there's this group of ladies over there, you should go talk to them. And I remember they were standing in a little circle, smoking their cigarettes, and I felt like I was in junior high again, and I was walking up to them, asking if I could sit at their table, and they were gonna be like, no, you can't sit with me. So I walked up to this woman, I don't know why. I walked up to her, and she gave me her number, and she said that she didn't need mine, and I called her the next day because I was willing, and we met, and in retrospect, all of the beautiful things that happened to me in my life weren't anything that I controlled. It wasn't anything that I manifested or that I created. It's just how it was supposed to be. And, meeting my husband, having my son, finding recovery, all of that. And, and then I was off, and I was willing to do the work because I didn't ever want to feel the way that I felt laying next to my son's bed, crying that I was his mother. I just didn't ever want to be that person again. And I think about 3 months into sobriety, I got pregnant. And so I was pregnant for, the majority of the first year of my sobriety, and I was so scared that as soon as I wasn't pregnant that I would drink again, because that's what I had done before. And luckily I did the work, I got involved, I was honest with myself, I knew who I was, I tapped into a power greater than myself, and by the time I had my baby, that thought was gone. I understand that it's not me doing it, it's me tapping into a higher power that's working through me. And it's breathtaking to watch that happen. And my husband's super introspective, and he was like, well, yeah, it took you 2.5 years to realize that? Like, yeah, I guess sobriety suits me. The majority of the first year of my sobriety, and I was so scared that as soon as I wasn't pregnant that I would drink again, because that's what I had done before. And luckily I did the work, I got involved, I was honest with myself, I knew who I was, I tapped into a power greater than myself, and by the time I had my baby, that thought was gone. And you don't have to understand all of it, because you won't. And if it seems scary, then you're doing it right. And I would recommend, doing what you need to do to be sober, because it isn't easy, but it is so, so worth it. And the things that will happen to you in recovery, you can't even begin to imagine them. You can't even fathom them. And, it won't be perfect, but oh my God, it is so beautiful and it is so amazing. And my husband isn't laying on the couch waiting for me to come home, wondering if I'm gonna crash the car or get hurt or get arrested or say something awful. He just goes to sleep, and then I go to sleep. And when I wake up in the morning, I get to pick my baby up out of her bed. She's almost 2 now, and she gives me this hug, and it's like magic. And like I said, the things that happened to me in recovery, I couldn't have even begin to imagine them. And they all happened because I was sober, and I was willing to do the work, and I was willing to be uncomfortable in order to love myself and be the person that I always wanted to be.